We'd like to begin this program by recognizing that while we gather at San Jose State University, we're gathered on the ethno-historic tribal territory of the Tamien Ohlone, who were the direct ancestors of the lineages enrolled in the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, and who were missionized into missions Santa Clara, San Jose, and Dolores. San Jose State University also desires to honor the military service of the Muwekma men and women who have honorably served overseas during World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, and who are still serving in the United States Armed Forces today.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is a very critical moment in the semester. Your presence here demonstrates your care for San Jose State University and your willingness to engage in forward-looking dialogue that exemplifies what shared governance means. When I welcomed you back this fall, I spoke about momentum, our collective responsibility to shape what it means to be a national research university in the heart of Silicon Valley. That responsibility includes how we steward our financial resources. Today's town hall is one of the most visible expressions of shared governance, coming together to review our financial reality, to ask questions, and to engage in a sustainable course forward. From my earliest days on campus, building a financially sustainable budget model has been one of my highest priorities. This is not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about ensuring that our students, our faculty, and our staff can thrive. Our budget is a symbol that enables what we do and how we do it. Our financial resources fuel student engagement. Our resources support academic excellence. It advances people-centered practice and empowers initiatives like AI Everywhere that actually catapult SJSU to the forefront of responsible innovation. Financial sustainability is what makes our priorities real and lasting. Now, let me speak candidly about the state budget. As a result of the 25-26 Budget Act, the CSU operating budget was reduced by 3% in response to the deferral of the $143.8 million in state appropriations. The Budget Act also postponed the 5% base increase promised to the CSU in the compact for 27-28. These combinations of deferrals are unusual budget techniques at best. In reality, given California's fiscal uncertainties, we cannot assume those dollars will materialize. So we have to plan as if they will not. But if they do materialize and our budgets are restored, we will be ready to act. So we're going to use scenarios to model cuts and restoration. And we'll continue to make disciplined choices. But let me be clear. The outlook for the state of California and the trickle-down effect to the CSU remains challenging. Here's a brief overview of the fiscal picture for 25-26. After factoring in mandatory cost increases, our campus managed a 1.8% or $8.5 million shortfall versus the full 3% reduction to the CSU. Our net reduction was offset by our strong enrollment and our disciplined fiscal management. Additionally, we're allocating $2.1 million to our campus operating reserves. These are difficult but necessary steps for a structurally balanced budget. I want to offer my thanks to everyone across the entire campus for their role and contribution towards our record enrollment and commitment to student success. Thank you. We are also seeing significant growth in our PACE and other self-support programs. These strengthen our financial position and it expands opportunities for students to access SJSU's academic offerings in flexible and innovative ways. We must continue to invest in non-state funded program offerings and partnerships as another means to diversify our revenues. I know one of our most visible pain points in our fiscal management has been our hiring freeze. I want to be clear. I know that this is hard. I know you're not happy about it, and neither am I. But we're filling as many open positions as we can financially sustain. And our cabinet leadership team has been very disciplined in adding positions back. So as we look to 26-27, we can't control the uncertainty in Sacramento, but we can and will continue to advocate for San Jose State and for the CSU. I applaud everyone that was involved in last year's advocacy, which improved our fiscal position from a daunting 8% reduction to a 3% reduction. Our Spartan voices joined alongside those of our colleagues across the entire system, and we must continue to be heard in the state capitol. Now, it might be abundantly obvious that we're also facing uncertainty at the federal level, with real risks to our budget. Recent actions by the U.S. Department of Ed, including the decision to end funding for certain minority-serving institution discretionary grant programs, underscore how vulnerable key areas of support can be. And you're going to hear more about this in detail in today's program. So I ask you to focus on what we can control: how we plan, how we share information, and how we make decisions. We'll stay disciplined and transparent. Our goal remains steady: to protect student success, to support our university community, and to rebuild our reserves so that our campus remains resilient in both strong years and lean years. This morning, you're going to hear about our budget plan and the work of the Budget Advisory Committee, along with updates on athletics, research, enrollment, and the student fee committee and process, as well as opportunities to diversify our revenue and improve our efficiencies. I ask you to please participate. This is our collective effort to shape a sustainable path forward. I'm reminded of a quote by Benjamin Franklin, and I quote, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest," end quote. Today is about building knowledge. Ask questions. Be part of the conversation. Your involvement is critical in shared governance. So we've got a full agenda today. Let's begin. Now I ask you to join me in welcoming our new Vice President for Admin and Finance, Kathy Coyotis, to share more about our current year operating budget. Please join me in welcoming Kathy.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Fall 2025 Budget Town Hall. I'm excited to be here on day 11 to serve you all in this role, and I so appreciate the warm welcome and amazing smiles that I've seen across campus. Today I'll share the major drivers of this year's budget, how statewide decisions affect us locally, and the steps we are taking together to ensure we remain financially stable and positioned for continued excellence and academic excellence. Please know that all of our work leads to the overall goals described by President Teniente Matson to protect student success, support our university community, and rebuild our reserves so that SJSU remains resilient in both strong and lean years. We're going to start our conversation with our budget calendar. This way you know what to expect and you know when it will occur. Our budget process follows this set calendar. The CSU Board of Trustees approves the annual budget for the next fiscal year at their September board meeting and submits it to the governor's office shortly after that. On or before January 10th every year, the governor issues the initial budget, and then it's revised and reissued in May, reflecting changes in spending priorities and in revenue. The governor approves the final state budget in June, And then in July, the Chancellor's Office finalizes allocations to the campuses. In August, we finalize our own campus budget for the upcoming academic year. Now we'll talk about the system-wide budget. The combined CSU total fiscal 25-26 budget is about $8.5 million, and San Jose State University is about 6% of that total budget. The 2025 Budget Act has presented significant challenges for the CSU and for SJSU. The CSU's general fund appropriation, as our president said, was reduced by $143.8 million. Although tuition revenue will increase slightly with a 6% tuition rate increase, that only partially offsets our rising expenses and mandatory costs for 25-26. What's particularly important to understand is that the compact with the state, sorry, we're adjusting up here on the fly. Day 11. What's particularly important to understand is that the compact with the state, a promise for additional funding, has been deferred. Instead of the $252.3 million in state funding originally promised for this year, it's proposed that the CSU will receive that support in 2 installments spread over future years, $100.9 in fiscal 26, 27, and $151.4 million in 2028-29. The combination of reduced state support and increased mandatory costs puts the CSU in a fiscally challenging position. Each campus, including San Jose State University, must carefully align costs with revenue available. And now we'll start to dive into our campus. This slide illustrates the sources of funds that make up the university's operating budget. The major sources, as you can see, is state appropriation at 47.9%. What I'd like you to note is that this is actually a reduction from the prior year where state appropriation was about 52%. So the amount that the state has supported us is dropping. Other sources are resident tuition and fees at 43.1%, other funds, non-resident fees, and other student fees. When we compare last year's actuals to this year's budget, you can see the pressure points. While revenues have increased slightly through tuition and excess enrollment, rising mandatory costs are eroding many of those gains. Overall, expenses for this fiscal year through June 30th, 2026 are projected to be about $25 million higher than last year's actuals. In other words, our budget isn't decreasing even though we took budget cuts. That's because our mandatory costs are rising faster than our revenues. The majority of the campus budget helps to support the salaries and benefits. That's about 3/4 of our budget. And 1/4 of our budget is all the other operating costs. This dynamic is shaping the budget challenges that we'll be discussing throughout today's forum. This slide shows how our operating budget, excluding state university grants for need-based aid, is distributed across the university's divisions. These allocations reflect our institutional priorities: teaching and learning, student success, and the infrastructure that supports them. And these percentages include the budget reductions for each division that we adopted this year. The largest division, Academic Affairs, as you would expect, receives the largest portion of the budget reduction, followed by Admin and Finance, IT, Athletics, Student Affairs, and Advancement. Our budget for 2025-26 is based on several important assumptions. Enrollment growth of just over 2,000 full-time equivalent students. We've built steps into the budgeted compensation for fiscal 25-26, and those steps are as promised in the collective bargaining agreements. The cost allocation plan will remain consistent with fiscal 24-25. A cost allocation plan ensures a fair and appropriate way to recover costs to all campus units, including self-support and auxiliary operations. A plan like this is similar to splitting up household bills. Just as roommates will share the cost of rent, utilities, and the internet in a fair way, we ask that these administrative and operating costs are shared across all units on our campus and contribute their fair share toward the common costs of running the university. A one-time contribution to eliminate the remaining balance of the campus internal loan from the 23-24 funding deficit, which was 5.9, is also included. And we also have put aside $2.1 million to start to build back the campus operating reserves. CSU policy requires us to put away about 5% of our operating costs, which is about $22 million. And those reserves had been fully depleted. So the great news is this year we are starting to rebuild those required operating reserves. These budget assumptions allow us to balance the budget for this year, but they also limit any flexibility that we may have for unforeseen expenditures or needs that may arise during the fiscal year. So enrollment. Andrew is going to talk a little bit later about enrollment, but this is the key driver of our financial health. This year's growth of more than 2,000 FTE provides additional tuition revenue, but it is not enough to fully offset all our mandatory costs. For FTEs beyond our enrollment target, the state doesn't provide additional funding. We only receive the students' tuition and fees. However, we're staying focused on student recruitment, retention, and success because our enrollment impacts our mission and our fiscal stability. It's also the right thing to do because when our students cross the stage, that's what we're all here for. This next chart shows the reduction of $8.9 million of general fund revenue as compared to the fiscal 2024-25 budget. In terms of new revenue, you'll see that the additional allocations, again, fall short of covering our mandatory cost increases. For example, the increase in tuition that generates about $11.6 million, but mandatory expenses for healthcare, insurance, and state university grants total $13 million. In addition, the campus received $2.2 million of additional enrollment funding from resident target reallocation. That's from the other CSU campuses. Projected total new net revenue for fiscal 25-26 are $26.5 million, which includes that 6% rate increase on tuition revenue and projected excess tuition and fees of $17.1 million. Okay, more numbers on this slide. On the expense side, this story is clear. As I've said several times today, mandatory costs continue to rise, and they outpace the modest gains that we're seeing in our revenue. This is the reality that we're working with. And in order to ensure a balanced budget, we have to account for all of these increases. Mandatory expenses, healthcare, insurance, utilities are projected to increase by $7.9 million. Compensation step increases agreed to in collective bargaining agreements are projected to increase by $500,000. And state university grants, that need-based financial aid we talked about, are projected to increase by $5.1 million. And in addition, as our enrollment increases and we add additional course sections, we also have to account for additional instructional costs. So that's about $11.2 million. Then we have specific one-time requests from each division totaling $2.4 million. As shared in previous budget presentations, we began 24-25 with a balanced budget with the caveat that the campus operating fund would pledge $9.4 million from other campus sources to offset its prior year's shortfall, or what we referred to as an internal loan or payback. However, following an in-depth review by former interim VPs and CFO Stan Nozek, the campus performed much better than anticipated. The previously reported $9.4 million shortfall was mitigated in large part because of over-enrollment and reduced expenditures, which reduced that 23-24 shortfall payback to $5.9 million, a positive difference of $3.6 million. So that's great news. That means that as we start fiscal 25-26, this internal payback for the shortfall has been fully zeroed out. It's important to note that the fiscal 25-26 approved budget incorporates an allocation of $2.1 million, as I said, to begin replenishing those important operating reserves. Per CSU policy, and this is a quote, reserves must not be less than 5% of the annual operating budget in each of the CSU funds for which the reserve is established and should accumulate over time to 3 to 6 months of operating activity. So the total amount we need in our campus operating reserves is about $22 million. And right now we are planning to have $2.1 million at the end of this fiscal year. So we have set aside a smaller amount this year, that $2.1 million, because we did pay back that shortfall. Next year we plan to add $4.4 million, and we'll continue to do that until we reach that $22 million threshold. So this slide is a good news slide, because look at that bottom line. That bottom line shows a big 0, and what that means is that we have a balanced budget. The campus projects a total of $26.5 million of additional new revenue and $35 million of additional new expenses and one-time allocations, leaving a gap of $8.5 million, which will be covered by the reductions that everyone made, that every division and every college made. We'll show those in a little more detail on the next slide. But again, the campus will have a balanced budget for this fiscal year. So this is good news in light of the challenges many of our sister CSU campuses are facing who are not meeting their enrollment targets. The combination of limited new revenues and increasing mandatory costs meant that we had to be strategic, efficient, and disciplined in how we allocated funds this year, while also being focused on the rebuilding of that unrestricted reserve for economic uncertainty. To help balance the budget, we implemented a 2% reduction across all the divisions. These reductions required careful planning at the division and department level and reinforced the need for us to align our spending with our highest priorities. We know these are not easy things to have to do, and it's not easy for us to ask you to do them. But they are necessary to help us maintain long-term financial health of our campus operating budget. The Chancellor's Office, we skipped ahead a slide. This slide is about the CSU General Fund loan option. The Chancellor's Office is considering an offer made by the state for a one-time $143.8 million zero-interest loan. You may have heard a little bit about this. This general fund loan would be one-time money, not base funds, and it would be loaned for no more than 7 months. The CSU needs to decide no later than November 30th whether or not to accept the loan, but it would have to be paid back by June 30th of this fiscal year. So 7 months, interest-free, but we don't necessarily know, especially as Dr. Teniente Madsen said, we don't know what's going to come down from the state. So we don't necessarily know, how we would pay it back. So that'll be a decision that'll be made by the CSU. So as we look at our student fee and enterprise reserves, we do have reserves that are in different areas, but these reserves are all good. Reserve slide. Perfect. So what this slide is showing is that we do have some reserves held in other areas, and we want to be transparent about the funds that we're holding. So these reserves are held as a result of our enterprises and our student fee and our self-support areas. So most of these reserves, as you can see, are already obligated for capital projects, for short-term obligations, and for catastrophic events. There's about $45 million in economic uncertainty, but again, these reserves are largely designated. They are coming from student fee sources, from our self-support areas, and from our enterprises. So overall, this is on top of our campus reserves, which, as we know, are zero. At the end of the fiscal year, we're planning to make our campus reserves be 2.1 million. Okay, next slide. Okay, in planning for the 26-27 budget, there are no shortage of challenges. The proposed CSU operating budget is just over $9 billion. And again, for context, we're about 6% of that. The plan focuses on two key funding priorities: restoring that $143.8 million that was previously cut from the base budget, and securing the full $252.3 million promised in year 4 of the state's compact agreement. In addition, the CSU is asking for an additional $1.1 billion in one-time funds to take care of urgent facility and infrastructure needs. The state faces economic uncertainty and a large ongoing shortfall, and the CSU system continues to face a growing structural budget deficit due to unfunded mandates and increasing labor costs. Remember the slide where we showed that 3/4 of our budget comes from labor costs? This is why this is a concern. And across the CSU, as well as here at SJSU, expenses are increasing more quickly than our revenue. This fiscal reality requires strategic decision-making to keep the CSU resilient and mission-focused. Okay, so what to expect from our own campus budget process? So first, I want to say that I commit to a transparent, open dialogue. I really mean that. We're going to have extensive involvement from the Budget Advisory Committee with best and worst case scenario planning. We're going to look at our excess enrollment and answer the question of where those funds go. We don't receive state appropriation for that money, for those students. We only receive their tuition and fees that they pay. So we'll be holding those funds in reserve for this year in case we have a mid-year budget cut. We just don't know what's going to happen at the state level, and we want to make sure we are prepared. And again, I want to say I truly commit, I really believe in transparency and an open dialogue around the budget. My dad used to have a saying, many eyes see more than two, and that's what I grew up with. I truly believe that we have tons of smart people here on this campus, and we need them involved in the budget process. So I invite you to participate, listen in. I'm so glad you're all here, and be part of the budget process. Okay, now we're going to move to Q&A. If you haven't connected to Wi-Fi, apparently the connection in this room is a little rough. So if you could please connect to Wi-Fi, then you can use the QR codes and connect to the Padlet. Okay, so at this time, we're going to have our amazing budget team come up. We have Maureen Pasag, Amit Jain, and we have Mike Visuzzi. It's day 11 for me, so I may need their help in answering questions, and they're amazing, so I'm so glad they're here. Okay, so questions. We're open for questions. Okay, and there's 2 mics in the room, so if you have your question, maybe just raise your hand and we'll come around. We've got one over here.
Hello. So this is probably not a fair question for you because you're new, but on your chart, it showed that we're spending 62% for academic affairs. In previous years, when we received a budget report to to the Academic Senate, the number was always around the low 50s. And there were even comparisons between us and Northridge and Long Beach and so on. And I think CSU-wide, the number is 54, 52% that of all the money that goes to academics. So maybe the provost who's here can answer that, or somebody who were present at the budget reports to the Senate year after year. The number was in the low 50s. Why is it now 62?
So, no, since I've been here, it has been 60 or above. I think you're thinking of the tenure density slide, which puts us at 53%, and the system at 54%. I don't know the average size of academic affairs by campus. Remember, we moved all of enrollment management over. It's part of that 62%. So we've actually grown as a percentage of the campus in the 6 years since I've been here. But I can go back to that budget book. I'm confident the lowest number I think I've ever seen is 59.5, but it's always been 60 or above on that budget presentation. I can pull the numbers and share them, absolutely.
Thanks, Vin. Anybody else?
Thank you for the presentation. I'm also new, just joined 2 months back. So I see there's a 2% reduction mandates to each of the department across the campus. I'm wondering if there is a guideline or discipline that is set forth for each department to manage the reduction.
So those budget reductions are managed internally within each department. My understanding is the campus as a whole spread those across the divisions and the colleges, and they were called peanut butter cuts. I had never heard that expression before, but going forward, we'll be looking at a strategic, thoughtful, and intentional way to spread those cuts as they're needed. And the Budget Advisory Committee and your involvement with that group of folks will play a really important role in shaping how that work is distributed.
You know, there's a number of questions on the Padlet about labor and labor costs. I want to be clear, I don't see labor costs as unfunded mandates. And our institution and our leadership team does not see it that way, okay? So I regret that if it's coming across that way, I want to be abundantly clear about that. In the CSU's 26-27 operating budget request that was just approved last month at the trustees meeting, they did include a request for salary increases. The Board of Trustees, the Chancellor's Office, the university presidents, myself, our cabinet leadership team, believe in the importance and the significance of salary increases for all of our employees. And that was included in the request. There are a number of fiscal challenges. There's no doubt about it, and that may prevent what has occurred this year where we were not able to provide the labor increases at the level that were planned for. As you saw in one of the slides, we are including the stepped increases that are through the entitlement process. I met with the Joint Labor Council to help explain this, and of course we'll provide more details about that. But I want to reiterate, our cost, our employees are a valued asset and not seen as a fiscal liability.
Okay, so we have several questions that touch on what our president just spoke about, and that's around how we address, the questions are, how will the CSU do makeups for cuts or freezes this year on items such as cost of living adjustments for staff salaries? Do areas need to be frozen? And then a follow-on question, I have the same question, how will you address ensuring staff salaries help us meet the significantly rising living costs? And another comment, agree here, these are not raises and merely just matching inflation. I think as we think about all three of these questions, and I had the exact same questions at my last institution, and since I've been in higher ed, this has been the story. I think it's important that we think about our inflation amounts as being quite significant, right? Over the last few years since the pandemic, inflation has been closer to 20%. And we all know that we haven't had those kind of raises. I think that it's very important to know that we really value your work and your contributions to the university. At the end of the day, we're here for our students, and we're here to help them be successful. And so it's a balancing act. And it is really important as we build the budget that we have your participation and that we're able to address these kinds of challenges. Okay, so next question from the Padlet is, what does from our enterprises mean specifically? Does this funding source earmark the funds? And in the case, so what we meant by enterprise reserves is it's student fee and enterprise reserves, right? And so if a student fee generated the revenue, then we have to meet the restrictions that the student fee was established for.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Kathy. How are you? So I'm not really sure if I have as many questions, but really food for thought for everybody in the room. One being when it comes to labor or negotiations, and I've asked this with my own union, APC Unit 4, why can't we ask or push for kind of like a cost allocation for San Jose State? San Francisco and San Jose has been named one of the most expensive cities, and so I think that's something worth exploring with our own unions, because it's not necessarily San Jose State's decision on how labor is handled, as far as I know.
Who asked that? Oh, Allery. I thought I recognized your voice. I have brought that question forward to the system office as a result of comments like that from others in terms of the delta in the cost of living in the Bay Area. This is ultimately a collective bargaining agreement issue that the unions have to agree on, and I have been advocating for some cost of living or different earmarks for some of the other regions of the state. It's ultimately, though, a bargaining unit issue, as you suggest.
And the last question for me is, it's a new advisory group, and I guess when you said, please work with the Budget Advisory Committee, in what ways would be the best way for anybody in this room to do that?
Well, fortunately, we have our Budget Advisory Committee co-chair on the agenda a little bit later. But the way that you would work with the Budget Advisory Committee is to talk with the folks on the committee and express your questions and concerns. I think that it's really important to think about folks as being representative and being willing to bring questions forward so that everyone's concerns are addressed. So, and thank you for that question, Allery. Okay, thank you all so much for your engagement. There's going to be plenty more time to ask more questions. You can use the QR codes to get your questions out to the Padlet, and we will follow up and answer them later. Now I'd like to invite up our Director of Athletics, Jeff Kanya. Jeff will share key updates on our athletic programs financial landscape.
Good morning. For me, it's day 1556. Thank you for the opportunity to share the current financial position of San Jose State Athletics. Today's presentation focuses on transparency, on challenges, and our strategy to build a sustainable future for our burgeoning Division I athletics program. As we move forward, our commitment is to greater transparency for the financial position of athletics. Our primary revenues include institutional support, student fees, conference distributions, philanthropy, multimedia rights, licensing, tickets, sponsorships, and game guarantees, to name a few. On the expense side, our major costs are personnel, scholarships, team travel, game operations, facilities, compliance in Title IX, and student-athlete well-being, including academics, counseling, and health support. Later in the presentation, we will show graphs illustrating the revenue and expense categories, so stay tuned. Athletics is not just about games and championships. It is an economic driver for SJSU and the region. Over the past 3 years, SJSU Athletics has generated nearly $677 million in cumulative economic impact, or roughly a little north of $225 million annually. These numbers include $443 million in advertising/marketing value and $63 million in direct and indirect visitor spending. Now, operating a Division I program comes with significant financial pressures these days, and those pressures are coming from national issues, NCAA and conference-related matters, and institutional/system considerations. On this slide, you can see all three kind of broken out in the respective categories. Costs are being driven up by scholarship inflation. Yes, we pay the 6% tuition hike here at San Jose State as the athletic department. Higher travel and lodging expenses, compliance in Title IX requirements, and growing investments in student-athlete mental health and well-being that are mandated by the NCAA. We also face increased facility maintenance costs, uncertainty in multimedia rights and conference distributions, and new realities like the NIL, the transfer portal, and the revenue sharing model. Like many FBS institutions, and our expenses are outpacing our revenues, creating a structural operating gap. The gap has compounded over the past few years, leading to a larger than expected deficit in the last fiscal year. With guidance from the Chancellor's Office and campus leadership here at SJSU, Athletics has developed a multi-year plan that addresses this gap by, number one, growing non-state revenues, number two, containing costs, number three, preserving our competitive opportunities and equity for all 22 current sport offerings. And number four, our goal is to reach structural budget balance in a transparent and sustainable way. For the upcoming 25-26 budget, we estimate $42.7 million in revenue. This includes $17.5 million from the general fund, or under 4%, $11.9 million from student fees, and about $13.2 million from non-state sources. Key sensitivities in this area are tied to fundraising, into game guarantees, media distributions, ticket sales, scholarships, travel costs, and game operations. For this year, our projected expenses are $45.2 million, leaving a projected structural deficit of $2.5 million. That deficit and a significant portion of the prior year's financial overruns, the gap referred to in the previous slide, will be covered by additional one-time athletics revenue expected to be received in summer of 2026. This summary illustrates the composition of our total revenue. It is important to note that SJSU Athletics budget realities, SJSU Athletics is arguably the largest consumer of an SJSU education as an entity. These are dollars that get reinvested back into the SJSU financial ecosystem, and those dollars come from external resources to the tune of over $9 million of cold hard cash. On this slide on total revenues, you can see the institutional support and student fees are our critical anchors. But our strategic focus is to expand non-state revenue resources, which in turn is largely dependent on competition and venue facility improvements to maximize revenue potential. On the expense side, you can see personnel and scholarships remain our largest obligations, followed by travel, game operations, and compliance-related needs. Looking forward, our goals for 25-26 include partnering closely with campus leadership on a sustainable budget model that protects the general fund resources, aggressively pursuing new revenue opportunities in fundraising, multimedia rights, licensing, concessions, parking, and ticket sales, continuing to evaluate opportunities for cost reduction and operational efficiencies, and engaging regularly with the athletics board to ensure accountability and transparency, and also collaborating with the Budget Advisory Committee on campus. In short, our focus is on ensuring that SJSU athletics remains financially sustainable while supporting the holistic success of our student athletes. To conclude, athletics is a vital part of San Jose State's brand and its vibrant student life, its community presence, with an estimated annual impact of over $225 million. While we face real challenges like the campus community itself, we also have a clear and achievable plan to close our structural deficit, diversify our revenues, while sustaining our current 22 sport offerings. Thank you for your time and allowing me to present. Please use the QR code and ask your questions, and my team is here to answer those questions. And now to provide insight on how our research and innovation efforts are adapting to current federal realities, I'd like to welcome Dr. Mark DeLarco, our interim VP for Research and Innovation, to the stage.
Thank you, Jeff.
What day is it for you?
I have no idea. I've been here almost 18 years. I think we're good. Yeah. Good morning. I'm Mark DeLarco, and I serve as the Interim Vice President of Research and Innovation and the Dean of the College of Graduate Studies. Today, I'd like to provide an update on our RISCA funding. I'd like to begin by addressing the elephant in the room, the federal funding landscape. Since January, there have been quite a few changes in federal funding for research that are affecting our campus along with every other university in the country. First is the fact that federal funding agencies have been terminating grants that they say no longer aligns with their priorities. We have had 25 grants at SJSU canceled, resulting in a loss of $6.3 million in committed funding. The canceled grants are from the array of agencies listed on the slide, and the loss of funding has profoundly affected the faculty and students engaged in these important projects. Most recently, last Wednesday, the Department of Education announced, as the President said, that it is eliminating programs designated to support research at minority-serving institutions. Another federal action that has the potential to adversely impact our RISCA is the appropriations process that is currently underway. The President has proposed substantial reductions in funding for agencies, that's the US President, that sponsor RISCA in his skinny budget. And Congress is currently deciding the federal budget. The House seems to be leaning towards budget reductions while the Senate seems to be favoring retaining the current funding levels, but we won't know the outcome for a few weeks. I should also mention that reductions in staff and funding at the agencies has already delayed some grant awards. Finally, a potential threat to our ability to support research infrastructure is the announcement that there will be reductions in facilities and administration's reimbursement rates from our current federally approved rate of 46.5% to a flat 15%. We are, of course, doing everything we can to reduce the adverse impact of these federal changes. For example, we are working with our community and government relations team to ensure that our congressional delegation is aware of the serious impact of these changes. And I, as well as other senior leaders, have joined Representatives Lofgren, Liccardo, and Khanna at various events to tell the stories of the important work that our faculty and students are doing for our communities. We are also working very closely with the CSU Office of General Counsel, who in turn are sharing our information with the California Attorney General's office. Attorney General Bonta's office has filed many lawsuits challenging some of these actions, and the courts have provided some injunctive relief, both in cases involving grant cancellations and the F&A reductions. Also, when a grant is terminated at SJSU, we file appeals, as appropriate, to affirm our support for the terminated RISCA and to seek reinstatement of those grants. More locally, we have developed a bridge funding program that we call Rapid Plus to help support critical work affected by terminations or funding delays. And we are working to diversify our funding portfolio to include more foundations and corporations. Through the great work of university advancement, we have been able, in a couple of cases, to find foundation support for canceled federal grants. But despite these substantial headwinds, our RISCA funding picture overall remains strong, largely because of the great work of our faculty. We have about $275 million in total committed funding across 410 active extramural awards managed by 273 principal investigators at SJSU. This corresponds to about $78 million in annual expenditures, and so represents roughly 10% of our all funds annual expenditures at the university. About 68% of that funding is from the federal government. But we also have substantial funding from the state, about 26%, and the remainder coming from corporations and nonprofit organizations. One really great effect of our RISCA funding is that we are able to employ more than 700 students per year to perform RISCA activities, thus allowing them to get financial support in a way that reinforces their learning and career prospects. I also want to ensure that we all recognize the strong growth trajectory that we have been on. We have been growing our RISCA funding at a remarkable rate, with annual expenditures doubling in the last 5 years. Our faculty were especially successful this past year, with a whopping $111 million in new grant awards, representing, let's applaud that. That $111 million represents a 52% increase over the previous year. This strong RISCA growth from our faculty, staff, and students, supported by the strong support teams in the colleges, the R&I division, University Advancement, and the Research Foundation, puts us in the #2 spot in the CSU in terms of research expenditures, behind only San Diego State University, and with more than twice the expenditures of any other CSU. So, despite the federal headwinds, we will keep moving forward, providing opportunities to our students and discoveries to our community. Thank you. Now, I'd like to welcome Giselle Nunez, our Senior Associate Vice President for University Marketing and Communication, to guide our second Q&A period.
Thank you, Mark. So Jared and I were looking at the Padlet to be able to incorporate questions from the Padlet and from the audience. So why don't we start with one of the questions from the Padlet, which was asking about the 2026 revenue for athletics, and Jeff is ready to answer that question, actually. So here we go.
I'm still at 1,556, so. So in summer of 2026, San Jose State signed a grant of rights with the Mountain West Conference. By executing that agreement, we were due monies one time to be distributed in summer 2026 once all the exit fees are collected from the departing institutions in the Mountain West. And that would satisfy the structural deficit for this year and the past overrun.
Why don't we take a question or two from the audience, and then we'll go back to the Padlet. So any questions for athletics, any questions on research, or any other question that has popped up since the last presentation? And we have about 10 minutes for this section. If you can keep your questions short, and we'll also keep our answers short so we can have as many questions as possible. No one wants to ask Jeff any more questions on athletics? Okay. So let's go to the Padlet. Jared, what other question is out there that we can answer? The research. There was a question on research. We're just trying to find it again on the Padlet. yet. Did it drop down already? Darn. There's a lot of great questions that we're going to answer after the event as well. I want to give Mark a chance. Okay. Who was the person that asked the question on the research? All right, no one here. Okay, let's see. We talked about the athletics revenue in June 26. There's 3 questions around that. Oh, so did you find it? Yeah. Where is it?
Hi, everybody. Too loud. So the question is SJSU preparing for the disturbing realistic potential of losing all federal grant funding, especially given we may end up signaling out and targeted in a manner similar to UCLA?
So is SJSU preparing for the disturbingly realistic potential of losing all federal grant funding? Mark?
Well, no. There is no fix for that problem if that were to happen. Our best hope is that we avoid that outcome, and we're doing everything that we can to assure that we are diversifying our revenue streams so that work can continue in the event that federal grants are cut. But if everything is cut, it's a dire situation, and I don't have a good answer for that.
Any other questions, live questions? If not, we'll read one from the Padlet. Okay. It looks like there's a question on that side of the room.
This is for athletics. There's a slide called economic impact, and I just wanted to clarify what that slide was presenting. So it says 677 cumulative impact over past 3 years. Is that how much we made or made for others? What does that mean?
No.
How about now? Okay. Yes, that was an economic study that was commissioned by Collegiate Consulting. That's not actual revenue. What that measures is the value for media, broadcasting, social media interactions, and general awareness, as well as the economic drivers from the inside the department. All that aggregated adds up to the $225 million annual estimated value, and then obviously times 3 for the 3 years of the study that was looked at.
Okay, which mic works? Let me give you this one. Thank you. And we're going to wrap up this section, this second part of our Q&A, and we're going to welcome Mr. Andrew Wright, our Senior Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management.
I followed directions. Yeah, I'm still taller than that. There we go. That's good. Thank you. Perfect. All right, I think I'm at like day 425 to go with the theme of what's happening here, a little over a year. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Wright, and I serve as the Senior Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management. You know, it's been said, and it's me that says this, it's good to be in enrollment management when enrollment is good. Well, today, it's a great day to be in enrollment at San Jose State University. In fact, I'd even call it historic. And given the numbers we're about to review, I'd recommend you remember this feeling because days like this don't often come. As you know, across the CSU system, campuses have been asked to adapt to shifts in resident enrollment, and the CSU is continuing its strategy to address declines. Some institutions are facing steep challenges, but here at San Jose State, we're not just holding steady, we're exceeding expectations. For 2025-26, SJSU has been allocated an additional 240 FTEs through the system's reallocation strategy, bringing our target to nearly 24,600 FTEs. Our success isn't by accident, believe it or not. It's a result of intentional, diversified recruitment strategies. We've broadened our reach locally, statewide, nationally, and internationally Partnerships with K through 12 districts, community colleges, and organizations are paying off. Using the Western Undergraduate Exchange, digital campaigns, and out-of-state travel, we're diversifying the applicant pool and strengthening pipelines that will sustain us for years to come. At a time when many campuses are tightening their nets, SJSU is casting wider, and it's working. Recruitment fills the funnel, but retention sustains the mission. This year, SJSU reached historic benchmarks, nearly 89% for first-time first years and 90.4% for transfers. I checked it this morning, Graduate 365, good stuff. And these aren't just numbers. They represent thousands of students progressing toward graduation. Retention is our stabilizing force in a national climate of enrollment decline. By keeping students on track, we're not just hitting goals, we're redefining what success looks like at a public, urban-serving university. Here you can see our enrollment steadily climbing back after COVID-19 dip in 2022-23. We've grown from about 36,000 students in 2019 to a projected 40,000 this fall, the highest in our history. I was waiting for applause because that's huge, folks. Both undergraduate and graduate numbers are growing, with graduate enrollment topping 10,000 students for the first time, driven by strong retention. This is the power of our all-enrollment approach. Every category working together to push us higher. While the last slide showed headcount, this one focuses on FTEs, which determines state funding for California residents. We're currently projecting nearly 32,900 FTE for 2025-26. Both undergraduate and graduate enrollments are driving this growth, ensuring our funding keeps pace with our historic enrollment highs. This slide captures our all-enrollment approach. We don't rely on just one funnel. We manage state support, non-resident enrollment, SJSU Online, PACE, and special sessions simultaneously. By cultivating all of these in unison, we create balance and resilience. This chart shows where growth is coming from. The blue and yellow bars highlight our traditional stateside students, which are rising. The gray bars represent self-support programs like SJSU Online and PACE, projected to reach over 4,100 graduate students by 2025-26. That mix is what makes this moment historic. Our strength isn't tied to single enrollment type. It comes from multiple pipelines all working together in one. This is the FTE version of the previous slide. What matters here is that growth is showing up in categories that drive funding. With nearly 32,900 projected FTEs, both stateside and self-support students are contributing to a strong, sustainable future. This slide is pivotal. Non-resident students aren't funded by the state, but they're vital to our budget and ability to reinvest in student success. We're projecting nearly 4,000 non-resident students for 2025-26, right at 100% of our target. And that's remarkable given the challenges we face: visa delays, shifting federal policies, and international uncertainty. Despite that, we've gained expanded outreach, strengthened support, and diversified pipelines. Non-resident students bring diversity, financial strength, and global engagement, all critical to SJSU's future. This is the FTE version of our non-resident enrollment. For 2025-26, we're projecting just under 2,900 FTE, right on target. It's worth noting, graduate PACE non-resident students don't count towards the CSU goals, but they're a vital part of the strategy. They extend our reach into diverse pipelines and expand access through multiple pathways. Here we see the growth of our self-support programs, PACE and SJSU Online. For 2025-26, we're projecting more than 5,000 students with graduate enrollment leading the way, and undergraduate self-support steadily growing. And here's the impact. SJSU now represents 1/4 of all self-support enrollment across the CSU system. That's remarkable contribution. This goes to show how central we are to reaching new populations. And this is the FTE version of that same trend. We're projecting nearly 2,700 FTEs in 2025-26, over 1,000 more than just a few years ago. This confirms that self-support programs are not only expanding access, but also solidifying SJSU's leadership role within the CSU. So where do we go from here? We keep diversifying. the Western Undergraduate Exchange, dual enrollment, re-enrollment campaigns, SJSU Online, PACE, National Student Exchange, marketing, recruitment, outreach, all pathways that open doors and expand access. We're not bound by a single enrollment funnel. Instead, we're building a network of pipelines that ensures San Jose State remains a first choice destination for students from California, across the nation, and around the world. So yes, it's a great day to be at enrollment at San Jose State, but more importantly, it's a great day to be a Spartan. Our historic highs are not a finish line. They are a launch pad. Together, across recruitment, retention, and student success, we are shaping the future of this institution and ensuring more students than ever before can say with pride, I am a Spartan. Now, I'd like to invite our Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Vincent Delta Casino, to share student-faculty ratios and close out this section.
So it says on this that I ad lib. Is that what you want? Okay, just checking. I will ad lib now. So we added this slide as last minute, to be honest, because I know there's a lot of questions about it. Student-faculty ratio is a calculation that the institution captures every year. We set 2017 as a benchmark for student-faculty ratio, and the Budget Advisory Committee in their January budget proposal actually recommended a student-faculty ratio of 27 or so to get us to a financially stable place. What you'll see in this is during the pandemic, we actually increased the headcount of faculty but decreased the total number of students, which resulted in the decline in student-faculty ratio. But as you can tell, student-faculty ratio is clearly back up. This is a projected number. We don't have the final data. We're not at census yet, but you get a sense of where student-faculty ratio is. I want to note it is very complicated because it is very locally situated and quite differential depending on which department you are in. But we're going to be sharing all these data and going through them. But when you take base budget cuts in academic affairs, $5.7 million this year, it is a challenge to not see some class sizes increase and so forth. So I want to acknowledge and recognize that and have this data in front of you, and we'll be disaggregating it further, and I'll bring it up again at my Senate presentation for the Academic Senate. So now I'm going to move to the scripted portion where it says, now I'd like to invite our Vice President for Student Affairs, Mari Fuentes Martin, to discuss student fees. I just want you to note I'm on my toes because this is set for Andrew.
Yeah. A lot. More. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you. Pues buenos días, Spartan. My name is Mari Fuentes Martin, and I'm the Vice President of Student Affairs here at SJSU. In my role, I oversee about 30 offices, from student success programs and wellness services to student involvement and equity-focused centers. Together, we work every day to remove barriers, open doors, and create conditions where every student can thrive. Our division is focused on the whole student experience. We are building new housing, like Spartan Village on the Paseo, expanding integrated mental health and career development programs, and fostering a campus community where every student can find connection, belonging, and a path to graduation. Many of the resources that make this possible are supported directly by student fees. These include the Student Wellness Centers, which provides health, counseling, and wellness programs, as well as maintain the building in which it's housed. The Student Union, which delivers programming, services, and student spaces, among other things. And the Associated Students, which provides programs, services, and benefits like the VTA Smart Pass Transit Access. In addition, there is the Student Success, Excellence, and Technology Fee, or SSETF, that helps fund course support, technology upgrades, and student support, including athletics. These services are critical to helping students persist, stay engaged, and graduate. As we continue to navigate the rising cost and statewide budget reductions, one potential approach to closing the gap is to consider adjustments in these campus fees. I want to be clear that nothing that I am sharing today represents a decision. It is simply the start of a campus-wide conversation. This year, the campus will discuss options that will support additional services to support our students. The new version of the Instructionally Related Activities Fee, or IRA fee, and an increase in the document fee. The potential for a new version of the IRA fee would help fund student programs including academic, cultural, and co-curricular activities, including the marching band, as well as Spartan athletics. These opportunities enrich campus life, create school spirit, and provide students more opportunities to learn outside of the classroom. SJSU is the only CSU campus that does not have a standalone IRA fee. Another idea to consider is a potential increase in the document fee, which would go toward a Bay Area-wide student transit pass. This would give SJSU students access to affordable and sustainable ways to get around the region, saving on time commuting and costs, and it will better connect our students with the Bay Area. All of the fees that I just mentioned are known as Category 2 fees, and they cannot be changed unilaterally. Let me reiterate, fee discussions must go through a careful multi-step process that includes review by the Campus Fee Advisory Committee, a group made up primarily of students, along with faculty, staff, and administrators. There must also be a student consultation. Any proposal must then be approved by the campus president and ultimately the CSU Chancellor's Office. Proposals intended for implementation for the fall of 26 must be submitted by January of 26 to allow time for proper review, engagement, and notice. This process is designed to ensure transparency, shared governance, and a student voice in every step of the way. Over the past several years, we have made significant strides in improving student success and increasing graduation rates. The decisions we make about these fees will be well-grounded in a commitment to sustaining that progress and ensuring that all students have access to the resources they need to succeed. Thank you for being part of this conversation and for helping shape the future of our campus. Now I'd like to invite our last speaker, Hugh Yong Wong, Vice Chair of the Academic Senate and Co-Chair of the Budget Advisory Committee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the last, but I'm not the least in the shared governance process. I'm Hugh Yong. I'm the faculty member and I'm the vice chair of the Academic Senate. And I also serve as a co-chair in the Budget Advisory Committee, BAC. Today, I will talk about the purpose of the committee, its membership, and then we will review the 6 charges we have for this year. On the left of the slide, it shows the purpose of the committee. First, it advises the president on the budget. Then it provides recommendations throughout budget planning, implementation, and review. Third, it assists with identifying challenges and proposing solutions. Fourth, as a resource for campus community in understanding university-wide budgeting processes. And lastly, support alignment of campus resources with the strategic plan. This is not an exam, you don't need to memorize it, and I cannot either. But in short, the Budget Advisory Committee exists to strengthen shared governance in university budgeting. The combination of responsibilities ensure that the committee not just reactive, but actively engage in shaping budget decisions in a way that reflects the priorities of our entire community. The right part of this slide shows the committee draws representation from across the university and brings together voices from administration, staff, faculty, and students. The membership includes the vice chair of the academic senate, that's me for this year, and the vice president for administration and finance, VPAF/CFO, as co-chairs, as well as leaderships from academic budgets and planning, a presidential appointee, a dean, a department chair, 2 faculty senators, 2 faculty at large, associated students, controllers, or designee, and then a staff member from academic affairs with budget responsibilities. However, shared governance works best if everyone participates. Therefore, you are strongly encouraged to ask questions, voice your concerns, and even challenge the status quo whenever appropriate. This slide shows the 6 charges for the committee in the coming year. We will review and support final recommendations on campus budget principles. We will identify and explore opportunities to diversity revenue streams, advise on proposed revision to 2026 to 27 course allocation plan in spring 2026. We will review process for student fee increase in accordance with policy and consultation with Campus Fee Advisory Committee. We will also work with VPAF CFO to address additional recommendations and questions from the BAC's May 2025 memo to the President. And finally, we will review the athletics budget proposal for fiscal year 2026 to 27 in concert with Athletics Board. Together, these changes provide a roadmap for advancing transparency, collaboration, and alignment with the university's mission. So again, the Budget Advisory Committee serves as both an advisory body and also a resource to our community, ensuring that the financial decisions are informed by diverse perspectives and guided by shared principles. I look forward to continuing this important work with the colleagues across the university, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This is our last Q&A for another 5 to 10 minutes. So I do want to reiterate that we do plan to answer all of the questions that are in the Padlet. We do have some folks already raising their hand. So if we don't answer your question live in the Padlet, we will compile answers to all of these questions and will be shared out along with the recording of the video as well. So let's ask our first question.
Yeah, so it was great to see the enrollment go up and you know, all the balanced budget and all that. But what's also sobering is what we are doing to those students with the increased enrollment. For example, specifically, I'm in engineering. We have you know, teaching labs that have equipment that are 40, 50 years old. So we do increase the number of sections, a number of students per section, but they are doing experiments. You know, so we are using the enrollment to balance the budget, but is that the right thing? I mean, shouldn't we be doing more than that to these students and then keeping things really state of the art? Thank you.
So the provost will help answer that question.
Of course he will. I actually agree with you. One of the reasons for diversifying revenue streams has been to try to preserve dollars to go into facilities and augmenting academic plans. One of the things that happened with the passage of a law called AB 2395, it gives us more flexibility in the spending of PACE dollars now, and we're setting aside more of those dollars for capital projects and other things like that. It is a revenue source that we're not likely to get from the state. If you notice, they're asking for $1.1 billion in deferred maintenance. I know this is recorded, and I'll probably get myself in trouble, but we've never gotten $1.1 billion from the state. And I think Oh, well, Romy got us 1.2 billion once. So, yeah. So, yeah, we got 6 million, but whatever it is, it's never enough to keep up with the facilities, and it doesn't pay for classrooms. So we're putting away money relative to that to try to augment the budget that comes in from the state, but we haven't been able to keep up with it. But that's why we've been pushing for the various diversification of the revenue streams in order to attempt that. I don't know if you want to say something.
Vin and I will be double mic'd. How about that?
Oh, how fun.
But we're not going to sing, Provost.
That's good for everyone.
For the question that came up, I think with seriousness too, the other thing that having a balanced budget allows us to do is look at all of our revenue sources. So to your point about equipment and laboratory spaces, we're very abundantly aware of these challenges. We talk about them at the leadership team. We're looking to better utilization and prioritization of our own data, not space, but our own data to address these high areas where there is high demand, high workforce needs, with the most appropriate equipment. And we're looking at that not only from state resources and our investment resources, which are called total TRP funds or total portfolio return assets that are specifically for deferred maintenance and equipment replacement and those types of things. We're looking at those issues systemically. So part of having a balanced budget for us this year, and as you heard, the payback from a prior year from 23-24 shortfall, we have a level playing field to look at these areas. You're right, we are playing catch up, but we are doing everything we can to ensure we have the best spaces available for students. We all have felt some of the pain points. There's no doubt about that. And we're working extensively to make improvements in many of the areas of where we're hearing from students are pain points to address those concerns. So we're not just, Provost and I and all the cabinet here, we're not just applauding, although we are applauding Andrew's efforts, we aren't just applauding that we hit our enrollment targets, we're applauding how do we pivot to ensure we're supporting every student to be able to persist, as Andrew showed in the numbers, and graduate, but making those high priority investments. And Vin and I talk about this almost on a daily basis.
Yeah. So there's one last thing to tie this, because it's actually a really important question. And one of the historical facts of San Jose State, God love us, as the Irish would say, is our space database was actually really poorly constructed. So one of the things under leadership of Stacy White that's happened over the last year is we had the opportunity to re-upload a space database. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because the state uses very particular formulas for various buildings and so forth. And we've only had one new academic building in the last 30 years. Part of that reason is we have not been competitive for space, I think it's fair to say, at the system level. And under the president's leadership, we are getting ourselves in a competitive space to compete for new buildings and new facilities. And the space database, coupled with the work we're doing in academic affairs to maximize space utilization. The other little dirty secret of San Jose State is we deeply underutilize our teaching spaces by the scale of the system. In fact, we're in the mid to low 60% utilization. San Luis Obispo, if you drive around there, Cal Poly, there's a new building every other corner. They're at 94% utilization of their spaces. They get priority then in the space building conversation. I see our former faculty trustee shaking his head, right? So 100% that he's agreeing with this point. So thank you very much, Romy. Yeah, so that all of that combines to say we're finally putting ourselves in a systems place where we can start to compete more effectively to invest in the facilities.
Hi everyone, I'm Judy Nagai, Vice President for University Advancement, and I oversee our fundraising. We have a few of our fundraisers here in the room, and if you are a fundraiser, will you just raise your hand? Thank you. So our small but mighty team, we are working with our donors and trying to raise money not only for scholarships, but also to support our faculty's work, research, but also facilities, lab renovations, improvements to do everything from improvements in the facilities as well. And then we need to partner with our FD&O partners as well. But we recognize that the improvements also need to be made And so we do have donors who do want to help us with facility improvements as well. And we recognize that. Our donors, about 98% of our donors, designate their gifts to very specific things that they want to support. But we are very much aware that we have a lot of facility needs as well on campus. And so we are talking with donors a lot about where their interests are, and then helping talk to them and help them understand many of the areas of needs across the campus. And then we're trying to match them up with our needs and their interests and doing the best matchmaking that we can as well. So we absolutely recognize there are a lot of needs on our campus. Thank you.
Hi, my question was actually very similar, but I'm going to approach it in a different way. My first question is a clarification question. The student to faculty ratio numbers, does that include all types of students? For example, online only students. My second question is an extrapolation question. How optimistic are we of our future retention rates given our pinch in budget and resources right now? And then lastly, given the answers to the previous question, what are some maybe conversational spaces we can have, knowing that we have underutilization of certain resource like spaces on campus, or maybe even other collaborative learning opportunities? Thank you.
Did they? Oh, it's on. Okay, sorry. So the student-faculty ratio numbers are the state-side student-faculty ratio numbers, so the state enrollment numbers. That's the ones we've historically looked at. So we can do a comprehensive, and we have the self-support data as well, but historically when we've talked about benchmarks, we've talked about stateside, in part because that's such a large portion. So just to answer that question. The second question on services and things related to support students. So it is a very interesting question. It's a very important question. The campus has made a direct investment, for example, in academic advising over the last several years, multi-million dollars, in fact, to scale academic advising and to invest in academic advising infrastructures, as well as the fact that the Center for Faculty Excellence and Teaching Innovation and the academic colleges have been incredibly active at reimagining classroom pedagogy, equitable teaching practices, and so forth. And so I would say if this was 2017, the last time we brought in a big class, we didn't have the infrastructure in place to support students. But the interesting thing about what's happened over the last couple of years is we've increased incoming first-year student size and increased retention simultaneously. So it suggests to me that all the work that's happening in the academic departments and programs around teaching and learning, all the support services we are providing and direct support to our students is paying off, and those retentions are carrying through. We're seeing increases in second to third year as well, and second to third year as well. So I think we're actually in the right place. Now, could we do more investment? I noticed the question about the success centers. We're doing as much as we can to hire as many open positions in advising as possible. So we have not slowed down. It is just there's a lot, and there's a lot to do there. But we're actively engaging in all of that. What was the facilities. So the work that has been done by Sarah and her team and all the associate deans and the academic colleges to really look at the utilization of our spaces and to be more strategic and direct in their use will help us a lot relative to the other things. So the interesting thing too, we're actually hit 30,622 full-time equivalent students this fall. We've never crossed 30,000 full-time equivalent students in a fall semester before. We're up over 2,000 from last fall. But if you compare it to the last time we were at our high, a smaller percentage of those students are face-to-face classes. About 25% are either online or hybridized. So it has a different effect. This is just our main campus students. Has a different effect on the use of the facility. So we actually have room to teach these students. And the optimization that's been happening and the work that we've been doing to open up the right size classroom for the right size classes is helping a lot. and that's affecting our ability to get the right classes to students. The last thing I'll say is we had a long conversation. Shelley was there, and Andrew, and Sarah, and the straw man, and a few other people were in the room. Oh my. And we talked about how do we start to actually support first-year students by automating their ability to get a couple of their key required courses loaded into the system. We do a lot manually. We do everything manually around here right now. And there are ways in which we can invest in those infrastructures. That also should help time to degree and other things. So we're trying to go through all of these things, and we've seen success along the way. But there's no doubt now that we're over 5,000 first-year students, it's another moment where we're going to have to make sure we have the right infrastructures. I will say, too, to this, all the work on administrative barriers, Melinda Jackson, a number of other people have invested in to make sure that we reduce, in concert with Maureen and team, the Bursar's office, the way we don't drop students, and all kinds of things now are actually helping. And all of that's coming together. I'm incredibly proud, actually, the tremendous amount of work that has been put in from everyone in this room, because if we tried to do this enrollment thing in 2016-17, all the data would suggest this campus would probably have crashed and burned a bit, but that has not happened this time around. And it's kind of remarkable. I look every day at the retention numbers, and I go, is it real? Like, is that possible? How are we at 89%? I mean, with an 83% acceptance rate. Like, that doesn't happen, right? That doesn't happen by accident. It happens for this collective work. That was a very long answer, but I hope it answers. You did ask 3 questions. It is fair.
I think Giselle is telling me the other part of the question here before, if I cut anybody off, was also about other forms of infrastructure around facilities. I addressed some of that in the classroom question. What I didn't address was the parking component. And we all recognize parking continues to be a pain point. I see Chief Carroll leaving. He's going out to cite me or something. I just want to say that we know that we're looking at other options. For example, our South Campus still remains underutilized, the garage there. Our garages on campus, of course, are full, particularly the first 6, 7, 8 days. We've been looking at traffic patterns. We've been talking about this. We know that there's other solutions in downtown. So we're going to think about, should we use other downtown solutions that are outside the box in addition to what we're doing. Many students have asked me if we're going to build another parking structure. I don't see that in the foreseeable future, given the cost of parking, and that we still have, despite what it feels like, some underutilization in our parking. But there's other solutions for alternative transportation, some of which Dr. Fuentes-Martin went through, but also us just thinking differently about other alternatives that may be available to us downtown.
Thank you so much. Other questions? We have time for one more. There's one in the back. If Sam, if you see, there you go. Thank you so much. Yes. So this will be our last question, and then we'll welcome the president back to close out our budget town hall. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Don't give the theater person a microphone.
There you go. If you stand right there.
My name's Katie Hahn. I'm the marketing manager at the Hammer Theater. I'm telling you that so that you'll know my bias as I ask my question. I'm going to read this from the Padlet because it's still waiting approval. Arts and culture can be a powerful tool for both student recruitment and retention. Is SJSU fully leveraging these assets, not only to enrich the student experience, but also to strengthen the university's bottom line? And if so, what plans are in place to strategically utilize and sustainably fund these resources, specifically our performing arts?
Some days it just doesn't pay to be the provost. No, it's a great question. It's a really appreciated question. I don't think there's an easy answer to that question because we have similar sorts of questions about a number of different avenues. And if you ask the first part, which is have we fully leveraged all of those amazing assets to market the institution, I'm going to not look Shannon Miller in the eye. I would say no. right? I think Shannon would probably agree with me. I think the answer is no. I think there's opportunity for more of that. That being said, I think we have taken advantage of that on and off, I think, iteratively. And we need a more consistent plan. To the funding question and of the performing arts and other things like that, that's also complicated because some of it happens in an academic college and then some of it happens outside an academic college, and how each one of those are funded when one's on an auxiliary side and one's in an academic program, they're different. There's different answers to those, right? So we haven't directly increased access to certain course fees for some programs and stuff that would help us with performing arts. At the same time, we've actually done a good job in some areas, particularly through advancement, to leverage donor dollars to increase performing arts sorts of questions. If we look at the Hammer in particular, that budget has been, I think, has been relatively flat in the time I've been here. So, you know, it's a challenge of that facility in particular and the ways in which we built the budget model, which I don't have a good answer to really dive in detail there, but I think it's a conversation I know that Dean Miller and I have had on numerous occasions about that facility, and actually had a conversation with the president recently about that, to the point of every single one of these amazing assets and the people that work with them can help extend the brand of the institution. I'm already in 100% agreement with you on that. And I think that we can do more to leverage some of these things more effectively. And I think there's opportunity, especially this year with what's happening in the city with so many public events and other things that are going on. In fact, just had a conversation with some of the faculty in art about extending public arts into the city more directly from the campus and finding resources to do those sorts of things. So it's iterative, but it's not. It's definitely on the radar, I guess I would say, in the big picture.
Okay, and with that, we the president wants to give a few comments.
Well, I'm going to ask Jeff to maybe make a comment, if that's okay. But I'm going to just build on what the provost also said. You know, we've been looking at scheduling of all of our resources. So part of how do we get students engaged and leveraged is having a common calendar. And we've been struggling with this, and there's a group of people looking at this calendar in question right now for all of our assets, which are across multiple systems. So it's one of the number one questions I get in the community is how do I find out what's going on at San Jose State? I'm going to ask Jeff just to say just a very quick, there's a lot of questions up here on the Padlet, and I want you all to understand the work that our athletics department has done with the athletics board, which is the governance committee that looks at that work, looking at D1 versus everything else and how conference realignment impacted all of that. And then I'll close us out.
Just when you guys thought you were done with me, I'm back. No, the president raises an excellent point. I do want to commend the work of the athletics board. Are there any members from the athletics board here? If you are, raise your hand. All right, Robin. Thanks for your work on the board. So for the past couple years, the athletics board has been looking at several issues. One of those issues has been around conference realignment, and there was a question on the Padlet about the classification. If we are in the correct classification of FBS Division I playing football, or if it would be better if we examined other potential opportunities dropping down FCS Division II. I think that was the question in the panel. This direct question was looked at by the athletics board. We ran all the numbers, and we did that in concert with the Huron Consulting Group, who also made recommendations regarding the classification. And the long and short of it is that we are in the correct classification in terms of maximizing our revenue versus the expense lines. If you drop down a category, you lose some of your NCAA grant money. Certainly your media distributions would drop dramatically because there would be less interest in the lower classification than playing at the highest level of Division I at FBS, as well as sponsorship dollars would dramatically reduce and philanthropy would dramatically reduce. So if you aggregate all of that kind of activity that would be down, any money that you would save from an operational standpoint, you wouldn't be able to raise that on the revenue side. So hence, this comprehensive study suggested that we were in the right category and that we needed to continue to look at our budget to make sure that's sustainable, which we gave that presentation today on how we're going to do that.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, so we've been sitting for a long time in one of our favorite spaces in the Student Union Theater. And I want to just take a moment to say thank you to the team back here who has made everything happen and the team up here. Thank you. There's a whole union team back here as well that are, and many of them that are students who have helped us prepare for today. So thank you all very much. And for all of you that came and for those of you who will watch the recording later, thank you for taking time to join us this morning. Your presence, your questions, your interrogation of the data that's shared with you is what helps make shared governance meaningful and keeps all of us moving forward together. I express my extreme gratitude to Vice President Coyotes and her team as well. It's on her very early tenure here for the thoughtful updates and the clarity that you've brought to these complicated issues. The work of the Budget Advisory Committee, thank you, Dr. Young, has been essential to helping us manage today's challenges while positioning us for tomorrow. And as you heard from many people, our financial outlook requires us to be disciplined. And conversations like this build on the progress we've already made in eliminating our prior year fiscal challenges, contributing back to our reserves, investing in student success, which was clear in many of your questions. All of this gives us reason to be confident. I know that there's still questions, and we will work to provide updates through the budget website and to future forums. Your input, your engagement is a critical part of how we look forward, and it ensures that every decision that we make reflects our commitment to protecting our student success, supporting our employees, and strengthening the long-term resilience of our campus. Together, we're going to get through this period of uncertainty. We'll be back with you as we make the choices that allow San Jose State to remain a thriving national research university and one that continues to transform lives for many more decades to come. Thank you again for coming this morning. Thank you for your partnership, and thank you for your dedication to this work. We appreciate you.